Hello friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Aliens in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Aliens. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you. I'm also going to give you all the information on which OTT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film storyline, star-cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Aliens is a 1986 science fiction action film written and directed by James Cameron. It is the sequel to the 1979 science fiction horror film Alien, and the second film in the Alien franchise. Set in the far future, it stars Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley, the sole survivor of an alien attack on her ship. When communications are lost with a human colony on the moon, where her crew first encountered the alien creatures, Ripley agrees to return to the site with a unit of colonial marines to investigate. Michael Biehn, Paul Reiser, Lance Henriksen, and Carrie Henn are featured in supporting roles. Despite the success of Alien, its sequel took years to develop due to lawsuits, a lack of enthusiasm from 20th Century Fox, and repeated management changes. Although relatively inexperienced, Cameron was hired to write a story for Aliens in 1983 on the strength of his scripts for The Terminator, 1984, and Rambo: First Blood Part 2, 1985. The project stalled again until new Fox executive Lawrence Gordon pursued a sequel. On an approximately $18.5 million budget, Aliens began principal photography in September 1985 and concluded in January 1986. The film's development was tumultuous and rife with conflicts between Cameron and the British crew at Pinewood Studios. The difficult shoot affected the composer, James Horner, who was given little time to record the music. Aliens was released on July 18, 1986, to critical acclaim. Reviewers praised its action, but some criticized the intensity of some scenes. Weaver's performance garnered consistent praise along with those of Bill Paxton and Jeanette Goldstein. The film received several awards and nominations, including an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress for Weaver at a time when the science fiction genre was generally overlooked. It earned $131.183.3 million during its theatrical run, making it one of the highest-grossing films of 1986 worldwide. Aliens is now considered among the greatest films of the 1980s and among the best science fiction, action, and sequel films ever made, arguably equal to or better than Alien. It is credited with expanding the franchise's scope with additions to the series' backstory and factions such as the Colonial Marines. It inspired a variety of merchandise, including video games, comic books, and toys. It was followed by two sequels, Alien 3, 1992, and Alien Resurrection, 1997, and a prequel film, Alien Romulus, 2024. Plot: Ellen Ripley has been in stasis for 57 years aboard a shuttlecraft after destroying her spaceship, the Nostromo, to escape an alien creature that slaughtered her crew. Ripley is rescued and debriefed by her Weyland-Yutani Corporation employers who doubt the claim about alien eggs in a derelict ship on the exomoon LV-426, now the site of a terraforming colony. After contact is lost with the colony, Weyland-Yutani representative Carter Burke and Colonial Marine Lieutenant Gorman ask Ripley to accompany them to investigate. Still traumatized by her alien encounter, she agrees on condition that they exterminate the creatures. Ripley meets the Colonial Marines aboard the spaceship Sulaco, but distrusts their android, Bishop, because the Nostromo's android, Ash, had betrayed its crew to protect the alien on company orders. A dropship lands the crew on LV-426, where they find the battle-ravaged colony and two live alien facehuggers in containment tanks. The only colonist found is a traumatized young girl nicknamed Newt. The team locates the other colonists beneath the fusion-powered atmosphere processing station and heads to their location, descending into corridors covered in alien secretions. At the station's center, the Marines discover opened eggs, dead facehuggers, and cocooned colonists serving as incubators for the alien embryos. The Marines kill a newborn alien after it bursts through a colonist's chest, rousing several adult aliens who ambush the Marines, killing or capturing many. When the inexperienced Gorman panics, Ripley assumes command and rams their armored personnel carrier into the nest to rescue Corporal Dwayne Hicks and Privates Hudson and Vasquez. Hicks orders the dropship to recover the survivors, but a stowaway alien kills the pilots, causing the dropship to crash into the station. Low on ammunition and resources, the survivors barricade themselves inside the colony facility. Ripley discovers that Burke ordered the colonists to investigate the derelict spaceship containing the alien eggs, intending to profit by recovering them for biological weapon research. Before she can expose Burke, Bishop reports that the dropship crash damaged the power plant's cooling system, and it will soon overheat and explode, destroying the colony. Bishop volunteers to travel to the colony transmitter and remotely pilot the remaining dropship to the surface. Asleep in the medical lab, Ripley and Newt awaken to find themselves trapped with the two released facehuggers. Ripley triggers a fire alarm to alert the Marines, who rescue them and kill the creatures. She accuses Burke of releasing the facehuggers to implant her and Newt with alien embryos to smuggle them through Earth's quarantine. The power is suddenly cut, and aliens attack through the ceiling. In the ensuing firefight, the aliens kill Burke, subdue Hudson, and injure Hicks. Gorman and Vasquez sacrifice themselves to avoid capture. Newt is separated from Ripley and taken by the creatures. Ripley takes Hicks to the dropship but refuses to abandon Newt and arms herself before descending into the processing station hive alone to rescue her. During their escape, they encounter the alien queen amid dozens of eggs. When one opens, Ripley burns the eggs and the queen's ovipositor. Pursued by the enraged queen, Ripley and Newt reach the dropship and escape with Bishop and an unconscious Hicks moments before the station explodes, consuming the colony in a nuclear blast. Aboard the Sulaco, the Queen, stowed away in the dropship's landing gear, attacks the group. The Queen tears Bishop in half and advances on Newt, but Ripley battles the creature with an exosuit cargo loader and expels it through an airlock into space while the damaged Bishop protects Newt. Ripley, Newt, Hicks, and Bishop then enter hypersleep for their return trip to Earth. Cast Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley, the survivor of an alien attack on her ship, the Nostromo. Michael Biehn as Dwayne Hicks, a corporal in the Colonial Marines. Paul Reiser as Carter J. Burke, a Weyland-Yutani Corporation representative. Lance Henriksen as Bishop, an android aboard the Sulaco. Carrie Henn as Rebecca Newt Jordan, a young girl in the colony on LV-426. Bill Paxton as Hudson, a boastful but panicky Colonial Marine private. William Hope as Gorman, the Marines' inexperienced commanding officer. Rico Ross as Frost, a private in the Colonial Marines. Al Matthews as Apone, the Marines' cool-headed sergeant. The Colonial Marine cast includes Privates Vasquez, Jeanette Goldstein, Drake, Mark Rolston, Spunkmeyer, Daniel Cash, Crow, Tip Tipping, and Wiersbowski, Trevor Steedman, and Corporals Dietrich, Cynthia Dale Scott, and Farrow, Colette Hiller. In addition to the main cast, Aliens features Paul Maxwell as Van Leeuwen, a member of the board reviewing Ripley's competence, and Barbara Coles as the cocooned colonist killed when an alien bursts from her chest. Carl Toop and Eddie Powell portray alien warriors. Some scenes removed from Aliens' theatrical version were restored in subsequent releases. Additional credits for these scenes include Newt's father, Russ Jordan, Jay Benedict, and her mother Anne, Holly DeJong. Henn's brother, Christopher, plays her brother Timmy. Mac McDonald portrays Colony Administrator Al Simpson, 27, and Weaver's mother, Elizabeth Inglis, makes a cameo appearance as Ripley's elderly daughter Amanda. Production. Early development. The success of Alien, 1979, led to immediate discussions of a sequel, but the production company Brandywine Productions struggled to convince 20th Century Fox to make it. Studio president Alan Ladd Jr. was supportive of the project, but left Fox to found the Ladd Company, and his replacement, Norman Levy, was concerned about the cost of producing an Alien 2. Brandywine co-founder David Giler said Levy believed a sequel would be a disaster. Fox executives believed Alien's success was a fluke and that it had not generated enough profit or audience interest to warrant a sequel. Box office returns for horror films were also declining. Progress was further slowed when Giler and Brandywine co-founders Walter Hill and Gordon Carroll sued Fox for unpaid profits from Alien. Using Hollywood accounting methods, Fox had declared Alien a financial loss despite its earnings of over $100 million against a $9 to $11 million budget. Brandywine's lawsuit was settled by early 1983, the result being that Fox would finance the development of Alien 2, but was not required to distribute the film. Levy's eventual replacement, Joe Wesen, was receptive to a sequel, and although other executives remained non-committal, Geller's development executive, Larry Wilson, began looking for a scriptwriter by mid-1983. Wilson came across the script for the in-development science fiction film, The Terminator, 1984, written by James Cameron. With Cameron's collaborative scriptwriting efforts, alongside Sylvester Stallone on Rambo, First Blood Part 2, 1985, Wilson was convinced to show the script for The Terminator to Giler, Hill, and Carroll. In November 1983, Cameron submitted a 42-page film treatment for Alien 2, written in 3 days, based on Giler and Hill's suggestion of Ripley and soldiers. The studio had a mixed reaction, one executive calling it a constant stream of horror without character development. Negotiations to sell the sequel rights to Rambo's developers Mario Kassar and Andrew G. Vajna failed, and the project stalled again. Revival by July 1984, Lawrence Gordon had replaced Wizan. With few projects in development, Gordon looked at sequels to Fox's existing properties and came across the Alien 2 treatment. He said he was surprised that no one had pursued it. Production of The Terminator was delayed for 9 months because Arnold Schwarzenegger was contractually obligated to film Conan the Destroyer, 1984. Cameron used the time to develop his treatment, expanding it to 90 pages. He drew ideas from Mother, one of his story concepts about an alien on a space station involving a power loader's suit. Because of his low expectations for The Terminator, Cameron had spent much of his free time during its production developing and trying out ideas for Alien 2. This script was better received by Fox executives and Gordon, but Cameron also wanted to direct the project. Cameron was a relatively new director, his only directing credit being Piranha 2, The Spawning, 1982, a low-budget, independent horror film, and the studio was reluctant to grant his request. His credibility was elevated following the surprise financial and critical success of The Terminator in late 1984, and Gordon gave him the job. Cameron's associates tried to persuade him to reject the offer, believing anything good about the film would be attributed to Alien director Ridley Scott and anything negative to Cameron. Scott said he was never offered the chance to direct the sequel, possibly because he was difficult to work with on the original. The title Aliens reportedly came from Cameron writing Alien on a whiteboard during a pitch meeting and adding $. Suffix Cameron also wanted his collaborative partner and girlfriend, Gale Hurd, to serve as the producer, but Fox did not take the request seriously, believing she could not stand up to Cameron, who believed she was the only person who would. Hurd had several industry associates contact Fox executives to convince them she was a legitimate producer. Cameron turned in the finished script in February 1985, hours before a Hollywood writers' strike. Cameron recalled the audience reactions while seeing Alien in the theater and believed it would be difficult to recreate the emotion and novelty of the original. He and Hurd agreed to combine the horror of Alien with the action of The Terminator. According to Hill, Cameron said if the first film could be compared to a haunted attraction, Aliens should be like a roller coaster. Cameron believed in having a strong female heroine to distinguish his films from typical Hollywood action fare, and wrote the script with a picture of Weaver on his desk. He referred to The Terminator and how he removed the normal protective forces from Sarah Connor so she had to fend for herself. Cameron had also always wanted to make a film about space infantry. The final script was well received, but Fox executives, including Chairman Barry Diller, were concerned about the budget. Fox estimated the cost as close to $35 million, but Hurd said it would be closer to $15.5 million. Diller offered $12 million, prompting Cameron and Hurd to quit. Gordon negotiated with Diller until he relented, and Cameron and Hurd returned. In April 1985, conflict turned to the cast. Fox did not want Weaver to return because they expected her to demand a high salary. Cameron and Hurd were insistent Weaver return as the solo star. Fox refused, saying they would damage the studio's negotiating power with Weaver's agent. Cameron and Hurd again left the project, marrying and going on a honeymoon. When they returned, the Aliens project was ready to move forward. Cameron credited Gordon with Aliens being greenlit. Casting. Weaver rejected initial offers to return, and despite being interested after reading Cameron's script, she had to be convinced Aliens was not being made exclusively for financial reasons. Weaver received a $1 million, equivalent to $2.78 million in 2023, salary and a percentage of the box office profits, the highest salary of her career at the time. Negotiations were so lengthy that Cameron and Hurd told Schwarzenegger's agent they intended to write Ripley out of the movie, knowing Weaver's agent would be told. Terms were reached shortly afterward. Cameron wanted an unknown actor to portray Newt. Agents scouted Hen while she was at school in Lakenheath, England, and though she lacked acting experience, Cameron said she had a great face and expressive eyes. Stephen Lang auditioned for the role of Hicks, but James Remar secured the role on the recommendation of Hill, his close friend. Remar left shortly into filming, ostensibly due to urgent family matters or creative differences with Cameron, but he later admitted he was fired after being arrested for drug possession. Hurd hired Michael Biehn the following Friday. Paxton credited his casting as Hudson to a chance encounter with Cameron at Los Angeles International Airport, during which he mentioned he would be interested in a role. Fox supported Paxton's casting because of positive feedback for his performance in Weird Science, 1985. Paxton was worried the character would annoy audiences until he realized he was comic relief for the tense scenes. Henriksen was concerned about portraying Bishop after other recent successful portrayals of android characters, such as Ian Holm in Alien and Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner, 1982. He played Bishop as an innocent child who pities the short-lived humans. He suggested wearing distinctive contact lenses to convey when Bishop was alerted to danger, but Cameron believed they would make the character appear more frightening than the aliens. Biehn, Paxton, and Henriksen had worked with Cameron on The Terminator. Aliens was Reiser's first major theatrical role, following small parts in films like Beverly Hills Cop, 1984. The Colonial Marines cast features a mix of British and American actors who underwent 3 weeks of intensive training with the British Special Air Service. Vietnam War veteran Al Matthews, Apone, helped to train the actors, teaching them how to handle firearms properly because their blanks were still hazardous. Before he left, Remar accidentally shot a hole through the set of Frank Oz's Little Shop of Horrors on an adjacent stage, 46. The training was intended to help the Marine cast develop camaraderie and treat the other actors, Weaver, Reiser, and Hope, as outsiders. Biehn's late casting caused him to miss the training, and he said he regretted being unable to customize his armor like the other actors since he inherited Remar's. Cameron created a distinct backstory for each Marine and instructed the actors to read Starship Troopers so they would understand the Space Marine archetype. Vasquez was Goldstein's first feature film role. She credited her physique to spending hours at the gym while unemployed, gaining 10 pounds, 4.5 kilograms at Cameron's request. 55. Goldstein wore dark contact lenses and underwent an hour of makeup to cover her freckles and darken her white skin to portray a Chicano character. She studied Mexican-American gang interviews to develop her demeanor and accent. Rico Ross, Frost, was committed to Full Metal Jacket, 1987, whose filming schedule overlapped for a week with Aliens. Although Cameron offered to let Ross join the filming later, Ross was concerned that Stanley Kubrick's projects often overran and opted for Aliens instead. Rolston misled the filmmakers to get his part. He had finished filming Revolution, 1985, and implied he was its most prominent actor after Al Pacino. William Hope, Gorman, was cast as Hudson before Cameron and Hurd decided to take the character in a different direction. Cynthia Dale Scott, Dietrich, was an aspiring singer when she was cast. Colette Hiller, Pharaoh, was upset she had to cut her hair short for the role because she was getting married shortly afterward, and made the filmmakers buy her a long blonde wig. Trevor Steedman, Wierzbowski, was a stuntman rather than an actor, and Aliens was Daniel Cash's Spunkmeyer debut film role. He offered Cameron his coat if he got the part and also auditioned for Hudson. The actors stayed at the Holiday Inn in Langley, Berkshire, during filming. Paxton described the actors' time outside work positively. "God, we had the best time. We all hung very hard together. That's where I first met Henriksen, who I fell in love with. Matthews was a really good spirit to have around, with a great voice. And all these hilarious British characters, like Steedman, the stuntman, who used to grab my bicep and go, 'Blimey, more meat on a cat's cock.'" Filming principal photography began in September 1985 on a 75-day schedule and an $18.5 million budget, not including film prints and marketing. Filming took place mainly at Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire near London because of its large sets and the lower cost of filming in England. Filming was difficult as Cameron, a Canadian, had little familiarity with British film industry traditions, such as tea breaks, which interrupted production for up to an hour each weekday, and was frustrated at losing hours of filming every week. In his book, The Making of Aliens, J.W. Rinsler described Cameron as aggressive and certain of what he wanted, which irked the crew. The situation was exacerbated by Cameron's hands-on approach, often modifying setups, such as lighting himself to fit his vision without involving the unionized crew. Cameron called Fox for advice and was determined to move the production out of England until Hurd convinced him otherwise. The situation was tumultuous because the number of films simultaneously in production meant the crew could not be easily replaced. Cameron and Hurd gathered the crew to discuss their grievances. Cameron explained the importance of the production and that any member of the crew who could not support it should volunteer to be replaced. The crew agreed to support Cameron if he supported their scheduled working hours. The relationship between filmmakers and crew remained cool. When filming concluded at Pinewood, Cameron told the crew, "This has been a long and difficult shoot, fraught by many problems. But the one thing that kept me going, through it all, was the certain knowledge that one day I would drive out the gate of Pinewood and never come back, and that you sorry bastards would still be here." He described most of the crew as lazy, insolent, and arrogant. Paxton called the crew's work impeccable, but their attitude more relaxed than the American crews to which he was accustomed. The power plant and alien nest were filmed in the decommissioned Acton Lane power station in London, and the sets were left in place until Tim Burton redressed the sets into interiors for Axis Chemicals during the filming of his 1989 film Batman. While filming the dropship descent from the Sulaco, shaking collapsed the set roof onto the cast and crew. Most of the cast were unharmed, but a large piece of debris hit Cameron in the head. Because of the tight budget, Hurd made Cameron pay for an early scene of a laser cutting Ripley free from her hypersleep chamber. According to Henriksen, Paxton was unaware he would be involved in the knife trick scene until it was filmed. Henriksen nicked Paxton's finger during the reshoot. Some of the early establishing scenes were filmed near the end of principal photography to capture the bond that had developed between cast and characters. Some improvisation was encouraged. Weaver discussed tweaks to her character with Cameron on set, believing she understood how Ripley would act. Her line, "Get away from her, you bitch," had to be filmed in one take due to the tight schedule remaining, and the actress thought she had messed it up. Paxton believed he was not good at improvisation and discussed ideas with Cameron before filming. Hudson's signature line, "Game over, man, game over," originated from Paxton developing a backstory for the character, in which he was trained on simulators. Hen found it hard to act afraid of the aliens, since she was fond of the actors in the suits, and imagined a dog was chasing her. Other cast members spent time with Hen between scenes, including Weaver and Paxton, who would color or craft things with her. Biehn said he and Paxton spent much of their free time together. Despite the difficulties, Fox was satisfied with the daily footage, and principal photography concluded in January 1986, on time and on budget. Post-production. Post-production began in late April 1986, 31. Several scenes were removed from Alien's theatrical release, including Ripley learning about her daughter's death and a cocooned Burke begging her for death. Fox and Hurd suggested removing a long opening scene detailing the lives of the colonists, Newt's family discovering the derelict alien ship, and her father being attacked by a facehugger, because it ruined the pacing and sense of mystery. 2 scenes with James Remar as Hicks were used in the film. Ray Lovejoy was responsible for editing the final 137-minute cut of Aliens. Fox wanted the film to be under 2 hours so it could be shown more times per day in theaters, increasing its revenue potential. Fox production president Scott Rudin flew to England to ask Cameron and Hurd if they could cut another 12 minutes, but Cameron was concerned further cuts would make it nonsensical, and Rudin relented. Music. James Horner met Cameron early in their careers when they worked for director Roger Corman. Aliens was Horner and Cameron's first collaboration. Horner called it a nightmare. He arrived in London to compose, expecting a 6-week schedule. There was nothing for him to score, as Cameron was still filming and editing, and Horner had only 3 weeks to compose. The producers were unwilling to give him any more time, and he was booked to begin scoring The Name of the Rose, 1986, shortly afterwards. Horner recorded the score at Abbey Road Studios with the London Symphony Orchestra. His schedule was so tight that the music for the climactic battle between Ripley and the Queen was written overnight. Cameron first heard the score while it was being recorded by the orchestra and did not like it, but it was too late to make changes. Brad Fiedel's synth-inspired tracks for The Terminator had allowed changes to be made quickly based on feedback, but Cameron had no experience managing orchestral music. Cameron cut the score up, using pieces where he believed they fit best, and inserted pieces of Jerry Goldsmith's Alien score and hired unknown composers to fill gaps. The director said in a later interview he thought the music was good, but did not fit the scenes he had filmed. Horner's Alien Sting sound was initially used only once, during the scene with the cocooned woman, as Cameron disliked it. But he eventually used it throughout the film. Unused portions of Horner's Alien score were repurposed for Die Hard, 1988. Special effects and design. Development of the special effects for Aliens began in May 1985, with John Richardson supervising a 40-person team at Stan Winston Studio. LA Effects Group created miniatures and optical effects. Cameron lacked contacts at the more established special effects studios and avoided using them because he believed his hands-on approach would not be welcomed. He also did not rehire many Alien crew members because he did not want to be restricted by their loyalties to the first film. Those who returned were often given a higher status, such as Crispian Salas, Alien focus puller, and Alien's set decorator. Cameron had enjoyed returning artist Ron Cobb's work on Alien, and conceptual artist Sid Mead was recruited because Cameron was a fan of his work on films such as 2010, The Year We Make Contact, 1984. Sets and technology. Mead designed the Sulaco, the Marines' spaceship. He conceived it as a large sphere with antennae, but Cameron wanted it to be flatter. The full craft had to pass the camera, and a sphere would not work with the aspect ratio. Mead designed the craft as a commercial freighter carrying a military unit. Its exterior was designed with a row of loading doors, a crane, and large gun fixtures to defend against threats. Mirrors were used as a cost-cutting measure to increase the number of sleeping pods and add a power loader. Cobb designed the dropship, the Armored Personnel Carrier, APC, and exteriors of the colony and its vehicles. The The Sulaco's dropship was designed to be life-size for use on the Sulaco set, but a smaller replica was used for some shots. The APC was a disguised pushback tug for a Boeing 747. The derelict alien spacecraft, used in Aliens, had been in historian Bob Burns III's driveway since its appearance in Alien. Most of the colony, apart from the main entrance used by the Marines, was constructed in scale miniature form. The set was about 80 foot, 24 meters, long to accommodate the 6th scale APC replica. The set was so large it had to be laid out diagonally across the stage, and forced perspective was used to add in buildings that would otherwise not fit. Cobb used a stylized design for the colony, resembling a western frontier town. It featured a makeshift construction from cargo containers, broken filming equipment, and beer crates. The alien nest scene was one of the earliest filmed. Weaver's participation was delayed by 3 weeks because of production issues on her previous film Half Moon Street, 1986, and the scene was one of the few not involving her. The Acton Power Station location was filled with decaying asbestos, and 3 weeks were spent having it professionally cleaned, during which time the alien hive was fabricated in clay, spawning hundreds of fiberglass and vacuum-formed castings that were installed at the station over a further 3 weeks. Cameron wanted to vertically pan as the Marines entered the hive, but disguising the area above the Marines would be time-intensive. A hanging miniature, about 12 foot, 3.7 meters square, was made from plywood and styrofoam, hung just above the actors' heads, and carefully blended into the larger set. After Remar was replaced, Cameron wanted to reshoot the scene, but the miniature had been destroyed. He was able to edit the scene to conceal Remar. The Marines' smart guns weighed 65 to 70 pounds, 29 to 32 kilograms, and were constructed from German MG-42 machine guns attached to a Steadicam and augmented with motorcycle parts. Since getting in and out of the smart gun rig was difficult, the actors kept them on when not filming. The pulse rifle was made from a Thompson submachine gun and a Franchi SPAT-12 pump-action shotgun in a futuristic shell. Weaver was opposed to weapons in general, but Cameron explained weapons were secondary to the core narrative of Ripley bonding with and protecting Newt. Weaver found using the weapons strange and difficult due to their weight and her concern about pulling the wrong trigger. Automated sentry guns were also constructed for Aliens, although they do not appear in the theatrical cut. Real machine guns were positioned atop remote-controlled hydraulic tripods that allowed them to pivot horizontally or vertically. The guns were capable of firing up to 600 wooden blank rounds per minute that were shattered into small splinters by baffles in the muzzle and incinerated by the heat generated in the barrel. A cast was made of Hen's upper body and her stunt double's legs to construct a lightweight dummy for Weaver to hold when carrying a gun. Hen's weight plus a gun would have been too heavy. Goldstein had never handled a gun and held her weapon incorrectly in close-ups, so Hurd stood in for her. The flamethrowers were functional. The art department had covered the sets in an unspecified substance to artificially age them. The flamethrowers vaporized it, causing fire and heavy smoke. Goldstein struggled to breathe, and since improvisation was encouraged, Paxton thought she was acting until he also became breathless. The nuclear explosion of the colony in the finale was created by shining a light bulb through cotton. Reebok designer Ton Lay was commissioned to design custom sneakers for Weaver to wear in the film. The only mandate was that they be laceless, so one could easily slide off of Weaver's foot during the finale. Creature effects. See also Xenomorph. H.R. Giger, who designed the alien creature, was reportedly disappointed that he could not be involved in Aliens. According to Hurd, Giger was contractually obligated to Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, 1986, and Fox was not allowed to negotiate with him. Giger was replaced by special effects creator Stan Winston. Cameron also contributed to designs but was not as concerned with the warrior aliens because they were on screen only briefly. In redesigning the alien warriors, Cameron remained faithful to Giger's work while building on it. Conscious that the creatures would be seen by audiences as people in costumes, he enhanced the designs by extending their arms and often filmed them hung from wires or from atypical positions to make them appear more inhuman. The aliens were played by dancers and stuntmen in lightweight costumes that allowed them to move quickly. Several 8-foot (2.4 meter) mannequins were used for aliens that were contorted into inhuman poses. Although hordes of alien creatures appeared to be in the film, there were only 12 alien suits. Simple black leotards covered in molded foam were used for faster-moving shots, and detailed models with articulated upper bodies and mouths for close-ups. When the aliens were shot and destroyed, puppets were hung up and detonated. The aliens' acidic blood was a combination of titanium tetrachloride, cyclohexylamine, acetic acid, and yellow dye. The facehugger design remained faithful to the original alien design, but the overall appearance was made to appear more organic, and its 8 legs were made more finger-like, enhancing the detail on the knuckles and adding fingernails. Unlike an Alien, which only involved one substantial jumping scene, the facehugger models used in Aliens featured full articulation for their tongue, legs, and tail, allowing for more action set pieces. The tail was also lengthened about 6 in, 15 centimeters, to give it more functions such as a whip-like action. 9 operators were required for the fully articulated facehugger. Other less detailed variants were used for simple actions such as scurrying across the floor. The design team struggled with making it scuttle believably while moving the appendages, they eventually developing a control wire along the floor that activated a gear inside it, causing the appendages to move as it was pulled along. Several rubber facehuggers were made to be thrown or blown up. Manipulating the facehugger inside a water tank was also difficult, as the tank had to be watertight, limiting the use of control cables. A method was developed that required fewer cables to move the facehugger around the tank. The tail was fitted with a spring that caused it to snap back and forth. Winston added arms to the chest-burster alien form, since the adult form had arms, explaining how it could drag itself out of a host's chest. 2 chest-burster puppets were used, a reinforced one and an articulated one for movement. A puppeteer punched the former through a fabricated latex foam chest. The scene took several takes to film because it could not pierce the clothing. To create the effect of the Queen piercing Bishop's chest with her tail, Tom Woodruff Jr. and Alec Gillis constructed a chest plate for Henriksen with a rubber segment of the Queen's tail flattened against it. The tail was pulled forward by wire, apparently exploding through Bishop's torso. A rigid piece of tail, attached to a body harness, was used to show more of the tail moving through Bishop, and Henriksen was levered upward as if he was being lifted by the tail. To complete the effect, a dummy of Bishop was constructed with a spring-loaded mechanism that forcibly separated his upper and lower body as if the Queen had ripped him in half. Once separated, Henriksen's upper body was below the set and a fake torso attached up to his shoulders. The android blood was milk, and after several days of filming, it was sour and foul-smelling. John Richardson designed the mechanical power loader exosuit with input from Meade. As with the Queen, a prototype was built out of wood and polythene bags stuffed with newspaper to see how the movement would work. The finished design was so cumbersome that stuntman John Lees, in a black skin suit, operated it from behind. The battle between the Queen and power loader was extensively choreographed, as Weaver risked serious injury battling a large, unwieldy animatronic. The camera was sometimes moved to simulate subjects moving faster. The scene of the Queen running at Ripley was one of the more difficult shots. The wires and rods had to be concealed, since they could not be removed in post-production. Miniatures were used for parts of the scene with go motion, a version of stop motion with motion blur added. Release context. The 1986 summer film season began in mid-May. The season had been starting earlier each year as studios attempted to beat each other with their biggest films. 55 films were scheduled for release between May and September, including the action drama Top Gun and the comedic Sweet Liberty, but the season was not expected to break financial records due to fewer sequels, anticipated blockbusters, and films by Steven Spielberg or starring popular comedians that had dominated the earlier half of the decade. Some industry experts also blamed the burgeoning home video market, which had grown from 7 million rentals in 1983 to 58 million by 1985. Films expected to do well were aimed at younger audiences and featured comedy or horror, such as Back to School, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Space Camp 106. Some films targeted at adults were also seen as potential successes, including Legal Eagles, Ruthless People, and Cobra. Aliens was seen by industry professionals as a potential sleeper hit based on positive industry word of mouth during filming, enthusiastic industry screenings, and favorable pre-release reviews. The film's success was considered dependent on its ability to attract audiences outside the young males and blue-collar workers typical for the genre. The tagline was, "This time, it's war." Box office. Aliens began a wide release in the United States, US, and Canada on July 18, 1986. During its opening weekend, the film earned $10.1 million from 1,437 theaters, an average of $6,195 per theater. It was the weekend's #1 film, ahead of the martial arts drama The Karate Kid Part 2, $5.6 million in its fifth weekend, and the black comedy Ruthless People, $4.5 million in its fourth weekend. Based on its opening 5-day total, $13.4 million, Aliens exceeded Fox's expectations and was anticipated to become the summer's top film, surpassing The Karate Kid Part 2, Back to School, and Top Gun. The Los Angeles Times reported long lines to see Aliens, even on weekday afternoons. The film retained the #1 position in its second weekend with an additional gross of $8.6 million, ahead of the debuting Heartburn, $5.8 million, and The Karate Kid Part 2, $5 million. Aliens remained the #1 film of its third weekend, with a gross of $7.1 million, ahead of the debuts of Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, $6.8 million, and The Howard the Duck, $5.1 million. The film fell to third place in its fifth weekend with a gross of $4.3 million, behind the debuts of The Fly, $7 million, and Armed and Dangerous, $4.33 million. Aliens was one of the top 10 highest-grossing films for 11 weeks. By the end of its theatrical run, Aliens had grossed about $85.1 million. This figure made it the year's seventh highest-grossing film, behind Back to School, $91.3 million, science fiction film Star Trek IV The Voyage Home, $109.6 million, The Karate Kid Part 2, $150.1 million, war film Platoon, $138.5 million, action comedy Crocodile Dundee, $174 million, and Top Gun, $76.8 million. Aliens, box office returns to the studio, minus the theater's share, was $42.5 million. Box office figures outside the US and Canada are inconsistent and not available for all 1986 films. According to the box office tracking websites Box Office Mojo and The Numbers, Aliens earned from $45.9 million to $98.1 million. This gives Aliens a worldwide gross of $131.1 million to $183.3 million, making it the year's fourth highest grossing film, behind Platoon, $138 million, Crocodile Dundee, $328.2 million, and Top Gun, $356.8 million, or the third highest grossing film behind Crocodile Dundee and Top Gun. According to Fox's 1992 estimate, Aliens had earned $157 million worldwide. The New York Times described the film as extremely successful. Reception. Critical response. Aliens opened to generally positive reviews. It appeared on the cover of the July 28, 1986 edition of Time magazine, which called it the summer's scariest movie. Audience polls by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale. Most reviewers agreed Aliens was a worthy successor to Alien. Variety and Walter Goodman said it could not replicate the novelty of the first film, but Aliens compensated with special effects, technique, and a constant stream of set-piece thrills and scary scenes. Variety added Aliens was made by an expert craftsman, suggesting its predecessor was a more artistic endeavor. Sheila Benson said Aliens was clever and ironically funny, but lacked Aliens' pure horror. Benson attributed this to an overabundance of creature effects in the intervening years, particularly the 1982 film The Thing, which, Benson said, took alien monstrosities to an extreme. According to Rick Cogan, Aliens demonstrated that science fiction horror could still be entertaining after many poorly received alien-derived films. Dave Kerr and Richard Schickel called it a rare sequel which surpassed the original, and Kerr appreciated the action used to develop the characters. Schickel wrote that the film had evolved from Alien, giving Weaver new emotional depths. Jay Scott said Cameron had redefined the war film, combining Rambo with Star Wars. Cogan agreed Cameron possessed a knack for action pacing and excitement, but Kerr believed Cameron pushed some elements beyond believability. Roger Ebert called The Last Hour painfully, unremittingly intense in horror and action, leaving him emotionally drained and unhappy. Ebert believed it could not be defined as entertainment, despite his admiration of the filmmaking craft on display. Dennis Fisher wrote for The Hollywood Reporter that the unrelenting scenes of action and suspense worked for Aliens as they had in The Terminator. Tension was created by placing the characters in successive, increasingly difficult situations. Gene Siskel described the film as one extremely violent, protracted attack on the senses. In the Orlando Sentinel, Jay Boyar called it the Jaws of the 1980s, the most intensely shocking film in years. Reviewers consistently praised Weaver's performance. Benson called her the white-hot core around whose defiant intelligence and sensual athleticism Aliens was built, and Ripley returned not for vengeance, but out of compassion. Ebert credited Weaver's sympathetic performance with holding Aliens together. Cogan compared her to a more attractive John Rambo, Sylvester Stallone's action character. Scott agreed, saying Weaver made action stars like Stallone and Schwarzenegger look like male pin-up models. He described her as the ultimate adventure heroine, balancing action with femininity and maternal instincts. Pauline Kael was critical of the film overall as too mechanical, but praised Weaver's physical presence and performance, writing that, without her, Aliens was a subpar B picture. Most of the cast was also praised, particularly Biehn, Goldstein, Henriksen, Henn, and Reiser, but Benson noted that less time was spent exploring the new characters than in Alien. Schickel said Henn played her character as endearingly brave and clever, without self-pity. Benson praised Horner's ruminative, intelligent music, but Fisher criticized it for borrowing too much from Goldsmith's score and Horner's work on Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, 1984. Accolades. Aliens received 2 awards at the 1987 Academy Awards: Best Sound Effects Editing, Don Sharp, and Best Visual Effects, Robert Skotak, Stan Winston, John Richardson, Suzanne Benson. Weaver was nominated for Best Actress, losing to Marlee Matlin for the romantic drama Children of a Lesser God. Weaver's was the first Best Actress nomination given for a science fiction film, at a time when the genre was given little respect, and it remained a rarity for the action or science fiction genres. The film garnered 4 other nominations: Best Original Score for Horner, Best Art Director for Peter Lamont and Crispian Salas, Best Editing for Ray Lovejoy, and Best Sound for Graham V. Hartstone, Nicolas Le Mesurier, Michael A. Carter, and Roy Charman. At the 44th Golden Globe Awards, Weaver was nominated for Best Actress in a Drama. At the 40th British Academy Film Awards, Aliens won the award for Best Special Visual Effects and 3 other nominations: Best Production Design, Best Makeup and Hair for Peter Rob King, and Best Sound. At the 14th Saturn Awards, Aliens received 8 awards: Best Science Fiction Film, Best Actress Weaver, Best Performance by a Young Actor Henn, Best Supporting Actress Goldstein, Best Supporting Actor Paxton, Best Special Effects Winston and the LA Effects Group, and Best Director and Best Writing, both for Cameron. It received a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation. Post-release, home media. Aliens was released on VHS in February 1987. A modified cut, including scenes deleted from the theatrical release, was broadcast on CBS in 1989, and a further extended edition with more deleted scenes, including the opening scene of Newt's family investigating the derelict spacecraft, was released on Laserdisc in 1991. The extended cut is 157 minutes long, 20 minutes longer than the theatrical cut, and Cameron has stated it is his preferred version. The extended edition was released on VHS and DVD in 1999 as part of the Alien Legacy box set, with the other 3 available Alien films: Alien, Alien 3, 1992, and Alien Resurrection, 1997. The DVD version was also sold separately, and both versions included additional behind-the-scenes footage. The 2003 Alien Quadrilogy 9-DVD box set included all 4 films and an additional disc for each film with behind-the-scenes footage and featurettes, including a 3-hour documentary, Superior Firepower, The Making of Aliens, and theatrical and extended cuts of each film. The Aliens disc included commentary by cast and crew members, including Cameron. Weaver did not participate. Each film was sold separately, including its bonus disc, in 2004. Aliens was released on Blu-ray in 2010 as part of the Alien Anthology box set with remastered footage, theatrical and extended versions, and featurettes found in earlier releases. The film was released separately on Blu-ray in 2011. For its 30th anniversary in 2016, Aliens was released on Blu-ray and digital download, featuring a new interview with Cameron about his inspirations for the film. In addition to the theatrical and extended versions, the release contained a limited edition lithograph of Ripley in battle with the Alien Queen, an art book focused on the Aliens comic books by Dark Horse Comics, and collectible cards with concept art by Cameron. A limited edition, 75-copy vinyl soundtrack was also released that year. A 4K Ultra HD remastered collector's edition of Aliens was made available for digital release in December 2023, followed by a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray release in March 2024. This release received some criticism for the use of artificial intelligence to improve the image quality, which resulted in some overly smooth and uncanny results. Other media. See also Aliens franchise, Aliens video games, and Aliens comic books. Toy company Kenner Products attempted to release figures based on Alien in 1979, but only an Alien action figure was released, which was quickly withdrawn when it was deemed too frightening for children. Aliens was considered a different prospect, despite its adult-oriented content, since it focused on action and featured Marines instead of ordinary workers fighting a large number of aliens. The toys were intended to tie into Operation Aliens, a children's cartoon scheduled for release in 1992 alongside Alien 3, and a series of mini-comics by Dark Horse Comics. Since its release, Aliens has appeared across a variety of merchandise, including action figures, punching bags, clothing, and board games. McFarlane Toys released figures for Hicks, the Alien, and the Alien Queen in the early 2000s. In the late 2010s, National Entertainment Collectibles Association, NECA, released figures based on the film, including Newt, Burke, and Cameron dressed as a colonial marine. NECA also revived the original Kenner designs in 2019, releasing better quality models. Aliens has had several video game adaptations, beginning with Aliens, the computer game, 1986, which was followed by a separate game, also called Aliens, the computer game, in 1987. A side-scroller, Aliens 1987, was released in Japan for the MSX, and a 1990 arcade game, Aliens, allowed players to play as Ripley or Hicks against alien variants. Some levels required the player to control Newt. Aliens, a comic book adventure, an adventure game focusing on puzzles, was released in 1995. A first-person shooter, Alien Trilogy, 1996, is based on Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3. Aliens Online 1998 was an online game which allowed players to play as colonial marines or aliens. Aliens Colonial Marines 2013 is a first-person shooter and a canonical sequel of Aliens, focusing on the Marines sent to search for Ripley's expedition, 166. Several other games have the Aliens brand or are side stories or sequels to the film's events and the Aliens vs. Predator game series. A novelization by Alan Dean Foster was released alongside the film. Comic books based on and continuing the story of Aliens have been published primarily by Dark Horse Comics since 1988, including crossovers of the titular aliens with popular franchises such as Predator, creating a derivative Alien vs. Predator franchise, Terminator, and Superman. Reebok's boots designed for Ripley became available to the public in 2016. Other versions included boots based on the Power Loader, Bishop, the Colonial Marines, and the Alien Queen. Rinzler published The Making of Aliens, a 300-page behind-the-scenes book with cast and crew interviews and previously unseen photographs, in 2020. Operation Aliens, a board game, was released in 1992. Players are cast as a Colonial Marine or Ripley and tasked with finding a self-destruct code to destroy an infested spaceship. Themes. Motherhood. A central theme of Aliens is motherhood. Alien can be seen as a metaphor for childbirth, but Aliens focuses on Ripley's maternal feelings for Newt. A scene cut from the theatrical release depicts Ripley learning her child died while she was in stasis, helping explain Ripley's motherly attention for Newt. Newt has also lost everything of value, and they form a new family from the remnants of their old ones. This relationship is mirrored by the Alien Queen, mother of the alien creatures. There are no paternal figures, both are single mothers, defending their young. The Alien Queen seeks revenge against Ripley, who destroyed her brood and her means of reproduction. According to Richard Schickel, Alien is about survival, Aliens is about fighting to ensure someone else's survival. Authors Tammy Ostrander and Susan Eunice believe Newt's capture by the aliens forces Ripley to realize she is willing to die to save her, demonstrating a selfless motherhood, unlike the Queen's selfish motherhood. Writing for the Los Angeles Times, Nancy Weber wrote that as a mother, she saw in Aliens the constant vigilance required to protect her child from predators, sexism, and threats to childhood innocence. Leilani Nishime believed despite the focus on motherhood, the nuclear family is represented in Aliens with a mother, Ripley, father, Hicks, daughter, Newt, and a loyal, self-sacrificing dog, Bishop. According to Charles Berg, the depictions of aliens in science fiction that became more popular during the 1980s represented American fears of immigrants, the other. In Aliens, this can be seen in the white-skinned single mother, Ripley, confronting the dark-skinned alien queen with an endless brood. Ostrander and Eunice also identified fears of overcrowding, dwindling resources, and pollution, suggesting the alien queen demonizes motherhood and makes it less attractive. She represents mindless, unchecked maternal instinct, spawning armies of children, regardless of the lives which must be sacrificed to ensure their survival. Despite imminent destruction by the colony exploding, the queen continues to reproduce. The alien's life cycle taints the reproductive cycle. Creation involves rape, and birth involves a violent death. In destroying the aliens and their queen, Ripley rejects the unchecked proliferation of their species and sets an example for her own. Masculinity and femininity. Ripley has been compared to John Rambo and dubbed Ramboette, Rambette, Fembo, Ramboline. Weaver called herself Rambolina. Mary Lee Settle said females in television and film had evolved from escapist fantasy to more accurately reflect their audiences. A gun, which can be seen as a phallic symbol, has a different meaning when wielded by Weaver. Schickel described Ripley as transcending the customary boundaries imposed on her gender, where females serve the male hero. In Aliens, the male characters are neutralized by the climax, and Ripley faces the Queen alone. Cameron said he does not like cowardly female characters and removes their expected protectors to force them to fend for themselves. He called the overuse of male heroes commercially short-sighted in an industry whose audience is 50% female and where 80% of the time it's women who decide which film to see. The growth of female-led action films after the success of Aliens reflects the change in women's roles and the divide between professional critics who perceive a masculinization of the heroine and audiences that, regardless of gender, embrace, emulate, and quote Ripley. The hyper-masculine heroes played by Schwarzenegger, Stallone, and Jean-Claude Van Damme were replaced by independent women capable of defending themselves and defeating villains in films such as The Silence of the Lambs, 1991, and Cameron's Terminator 2, Judgment Day, 1991. These female characters often perform stereotypical male actions and have muscular physiques rather than feminine, soft bodies. When Ripley has seized command of the Marines and is no longer a passive outsider in Aliens, the traditional male hero, Hicks, instructs her in the use of their weapons. The comparison of Ripley to Rambo conflates her with the male, muscle-bound, gun-wielding action hero. To balance her masculine traits, Cameron gives Ripley maternal instincts. This counters homophobic audiences who might see a masculinized female as lesbian or butch. These traits are further offset by the more openly masculine Vasquez, a minor character. Vasquez, who has short hair and bigger muscles, is introduced to the audience by working out and is asked if she has ever been mistaken for a man. Weber appreciated the change in female characters between the films, contrasting Alien's hysterical Lambert with the tough Vasquez, who sacrifices herself for her team, not only for the protagonist. War and trauma. Aliens has been described as an allegory for the Vietnam War. The Marines, like the United States, have superior weaponry and technology that proves largely ineffective against an unseen local enemy. Like some Vietnam veterans, Ripley developed post-traumatic stress disorder after the events of Alien. Writer Joe Abbott contrasted the depiction of the military in Aliens to the 1954 science fiction film Them. In both films, humans are beset by a monstrous invasion. In Them, the military is the hero despite its responsibility for the infestation. Abbott said its post-World War II American setting depicts a competent military and a state authority that demands and receives the compliance of its citizens. The image of the post-Vietnam military is tarnished and scrutinized. In Aliens, it is ill-equipped, bumbling, and incapable of combating the threat posed by the alien creatures. Citizen cooperation can no longer be demanded or expected, and it is Ripley, an independent contractor from outside the state and military infrastructures, who saves the day. Unlike Them, the military is not at fault for creating the problem in Aliens. It is the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, the company. The power of the state has been superseded by the corporation, which also demands conformity for rewards and advancement and reflects a growing mistrust of corporatism. The company is represented by Burke, a self-interested opportunist. Ripley is elevated throughout Aliens as she prioritizes the survival and safety of all humans, while Burke is often willing to callously sacrifice human life in pursuit of the interests of the company. According to Weaver, Aliens is about confronting trauma to obtain closure. This may be seen as a reflection of Ronald Reagan's United States presidency and a conservatism that believed the hero must return to confront their fears with ethics and morality on their side. Comparing Alien with Aliens, Roger Luckhurst said, "Even if Alien was a piece of leftist science fiction, the core of its myth could be inflected the other way. Cameron's Aliens would be a defiantly Reaganite version of the story, pumped, militarized, libertarian, driven by a staunch defense of the nuclear family." Abbott said Aliens adheres to a radical ideology and condemns centrism. Similar films were popular because they represented audience dissatisfaction with the social status quo. The film places power in the individual, Ripley, instead of institutions like the military, corporations, or the government. The Bishop character also allows Ripley to confront her distrust of androids that resulted from the deception of Ash, portrayed by Ian Holm in Alien. Unlike Ash, Bishop is openly an android and conveys both a similarly unassuming personality and a fascination with the alien creatures. Aliens imbues Bishop with a degree of humanity as he volunteers for a potentially suicidal mission. Although the other characters assume he is artificial and thus unafraid, Bishop affirms, "Believe me, I'd prefer not to. I may be synthetic, but I'm not stupid." Legacy. Cultural influence. A cinematic touchstone, Aliens has had an enduring influence on filmmaking. Elements such as a team of soldiers being dismantled by a villain have been repeated to the point of cliché. The same is true of Horner's oft-imitated score, which regularly appeared in action film trailers for the following decade. The film's influence can also be seen in video games, particularly science fiction games, ships, armor, and weapons, as well as the 1989 Italian film Shocking Dark, a remake of Aliens that relocates much of the plot and scenes to a Venetian setting and incorporates elements of the Terminator. Outside Italy, it was released as Terminator 2. In Avengers: Infinity War 2018, Spider-Man discusses the film with Iron Man, and the two use the Xenomorph Queen's defeat as inspiration for how to kill Ebony Maw and free Doctor Strange. Although The Terminator was a success for Cameron, the critical and commercial success of Aliens made him a blockbuster director. It also expanded the Alien series into a franchise spanning video games, comic books, and toys. Although Ripley and the alien creature originated in Alien, Cameron elaborated on the creature's life cycle, added new characters and factions, such as the Colonial Marines, and extended the film's universe. Ripley became a post-feminist icon, a proactive hero who retained feminine traits. Aliens features popular quotes, including Paxton's, "Game over, man, game over," and Weaver's, "Get away from her, you bitch," which is considered one of Aliens' most memorable lines and has often been repeated in other media. Aliens was named by director Roland Emmerich as one of his top 10 science fiction films, alongside Alien. Many cast and crew members reunited at the 2016 San Diego Comic-Con to celebrate the film's 30th anniversary, including Weaver, Biehn, Paxton, Henriksen, Reiser, Henn, Cameron, and Hurd. Cameron said he normally would not participate and did not do so for the Terminator's anniversary, but he considered Aliens special because of its impact on his career. Asked why he thought Aliens' popularity had endured, Cameron said, "I have to take my filmmaker hat off and look at it as a fan and think, well, I really like those characters. There's certain lines, moments. You remember moments. It's satisfying. It ends in a satisfying way. But I actually think it's those characters. We can all relate to Hudson, running around, what the hell are we gonna do now, man? What the fuck we gonna do? We all know that guy." Hurd believed that it was the experience itself. It's a great midnight screening movie because you can talk back to the screen and you can have this group experience. It not only makes you feel something, it makes you cheer, it makes you jump. When you think of all the things that something can do, which is projected on a screen, it ticks all those boxes and it makes you laugh. The ensemble cast's popularity led to many members appearing together in later films, including Henriksen, Goldstein, and Paxton in Near Dark 1987, as well as Goldstein and Rolston in Lethal Weapon 2, 1989. Biehn lost a role in Cameron's Avatar, 2009, because Weaver had been cast, and the director did not want to create an obvious association with Aliens. Paxton is also remembered as one of only 2 actors, along with Lance Henriksen, to play characters killed by an alien, a Terminator in The Terminator, and a Predator in 1990's Predator 2. Despite her sudden fame, Henn decided not to pursue acting so that she could remain close to her family. She said some people resented her fame and was uncertain whether people liked her for being in Aliens or for herself. Henn became a teacher. She maintains a relationship with Weaver and kept a framed picture of her and Weaver that the actress had given her after filming was complete. Critical reassessment. Aliens is considered one of the greatest science fiction films ever made, as well as being among the best films of the 1980s, and one of the greatest action films of all time. The British Film Institute called Aliens one of the 10 greatest action films, saying, "A matriarchal masterpiece of God-bothering structural engineering, there's really little that Aliens doesn't get right. From its slow-burn exemplification of character and world-building, through to its jab-jab-hook-pause-uppercut series of sustained climaxes, Cameron delivers a masterclass in action direction." The film is also considered one of the best sequels of all time, and equal to, or better than, Alien. According to Slant magazine, it exceeded Alien in every way. In 2009, Den of Geek called it the best blockbuster sequel ever made, and remarkable even as a standalone film. In 2017, the website ranked it the second best film in the series, behind Alien, 247. In 2011, Empire called it the greatest movie sequel ever. Empire also listed Aliens as the 30th best film ever made on the magazine's 500 Greatest Movies of All Time list. Its readers ranked it the 17th best. The film is listed in the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. Aliens has a 94% approval rating on the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes from 140 reviews, with an average rating of 8.9/10. Its critical consensus reads, "While Alien was a marvel of slow building, atmospheric tension, Aliens packs a much more visceral punch and features a typically strong performance from Sigourney Weaver." The film has a score of 84 out of 100 on Metacritic, based on 22 critics, indicating universal acclaim. The Ellen Ripley character has also been recognized. The American Film Institute ranked her the 8th most heroic character on its 2003 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains list, and she was 9th on Empire's 2006 100 Greatest Movie Characters list. Despite her character's popularity, the casting of Jeanette Goldstein, a Jewish actress of Russian, Moroccan, and Brazilian descent, as the Hispanic Vasquez has been considered odd. Goldstein has said she considers herself unrecognizable as Vasquez on film, but a muscular actress was required, and the filmmakers could not find anyone else with her physique. Franchise. Main article, Alien franchise. Alien's success resulted in immediate discussion of a sequel. Alien 3 was released in 1992, after a tumultuous development involving several writers and directors. Cameron did not return. The film was financially successful, but generally panned by critics, and its director, David Fincher, disowned it after the release, citing studio interference. The film was also derided by fans because it killed the Hicks and Newt characters off-screen. Biehn called it one of his greatest disappointments and refused permission for the use of his likeness in Alien 3. Regarding the treatment of his characters, Cameron said, "I thought the decision to eliminate Newt, Hicks, and Bishop was dumb. I thought it was a huge slap in the face to the fans. I think it was a big mistake. Certainly, had we been involved, we would not have done that, because we felt we earned something with the audience for those characters." An early script for Alien 3 by William Gibson was adapted as a 2019 audio drama, focusing on Hicks as the protagonist, with Biehn and Henriksen voicing their respective roles. A 5-hour 2017 audio drama, River of Pain, takes place between Alien and Aliens and covers the early days of the LV-426 colony and its downfall to the aliens. Actors returning to voice their characters included William Hope, Mac McDonald, Stuart Milligan, and Alaba Parsons. A third sequel, Alien Resurrection, was released in 1997. Instead of a fourth sequel, Fox began development of a prequel crossover film, Alien vs. Predator, 2004, pitting the series Aliens against the titular alien race of its science fiction property, Predator. The film was poorly received. It was followed by a sequel, Aliens vs. Predator, Requiem, 2007, the least financially successful and worst-reviewed film in either franchise. Ridley Scott returned to the series for Prometheus, 2012, a prequel to Alien, and its sequel, Alien Covenant, 2017. A fourth Alien sequel was in development by 2020, but was canceled by the Walt Disney Company following its acquisition of 20th Century Fox. A standalone film in the Alien franchise, Alien Romulus, was released on August 16, 2024. It is set between the events of Alien and Aliens. The ads for Aliens claim that this movie will frighten you as few movies have, and, for once, the ads don't lie. The movie is so intense that it creates a problem for me as a reviewer. Do I praise its craftsmanship, or do I tell you it left me feeling wrung out and unhappy? It has been a week since I saw it, so the emotions have faded a little, leaving with me an appreciation of the movie's technical qualities. But when I walked out of the theater, there were knots in my stomach from the film's roller coaster ride of violence. This is not the kind of movie where it means anything to say you enjoyed it. Aliens is a sequel to the very effective 1979 film, Alien, but it tells a self-contained story that begins 57 years after the previous story ended. The first time around, you may recall, Sigourney Weaver and a shipload of her fellow space voyagers were exploring a newly discovered planet when they found an abandoned spaceship. Surviving in the ship was an alien life form that seemed to consist primarily of teeth. The aliens were pure malevolence. Their only function was to attack and eat anything that was warm and moved, and they incubated their young inside the bodies of their victims. Weaver was the only survivor of that first expedition, and after saving her ship by expelling an alien through the airlock into deep space, she put herself into hibernation. She is found 57 years later by a salvage ship, and when she awakes, she is still tormented by nightmares. The script does not provide her, however, with even a single line of regret after she learns that 57 years have passed and everyone she knew is dead. A new expedition is sent back to the mystery planet. Weaver is on board. She knows what the aliens are like and thinks the only sane solution is to nuke them from outer space. But in the meantime, she learns to her horror that a human colony has been established on the planet and billions of dollars have been invested in it. Now Earth has lost contact with the colony. Has it been attacked by aliens? Are there stars in the sky? The crew is made up of an interesting mixed bag of technicians and military personnel. My favorites were Lance Henriksen as a loyal android, Jeanette Goldstein as a muscular Marine private, and Michael Biehn as the uncertain Hicks. Also on board is the slimy Burke, Paul Reiser, who represents the owners of the planet's expensive colony and dreams of making millions by using the aliens as a secret weapon. The movie gives us just enough setup to establish the characters and explain the situation. Then, the action starts. The colony has, of course, been overrun by the aliens, all except for one plucky little girl, Carrie Henn, who has somehow survived by hiding in the air ducts. The Marines explore the base on foot, which seems a little silly in view of the great speed with which the aliens attack. Nobody seems very interested in listening to Weaver's warnings. After all, she's only the one person who has seen an alien, so what does she know? And then the movie escalates into a non-stop war between human and alien. It's here that my nerves started to fail. Aliens is absolutely, painfully, and unremittingly intense for at least its last hour. Weaver goes into battle to save her colleagues, herself and the little girl, and the aliens drop from the ceiling, pop up out of the floor, and crawl out of the ventilation shafts. In one of the movie's less plausible moments, one alien even seems to know how to work the elevator buttons. I have never seen a movie that maintains such a pitch of intensity for so long. It's like being on some kind of hair-raising carnival ride that never stops. I don't know how else to describe this. The movie made me feel bad. It filled me with feelings of unease and disquiet and anxiety. I walked outside and I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was drained. I'm not sure Aliens is what we mean by entertainment, yet I have to be accurate about this movie. It is a superb example of filmmaking craft. The director, James Cameron, has been assigned to make an intense and horrifying thriller, and he has delivered. Weaver, who is on screen almost all the time, comes through with a very strong, sympathetic performance. She's the thread that holds everything together. The supporting players are sharply drawn. The special effects are professional. I'm giving the movie a high rating for its skill and professionalism, and because it does the job it says it will do. I am also advising you not to eat before you go to see it. I'm no James Cameron newbie. Being born in 1998 predisposes you to having Titanic played around you at all times for the first 5 years of your life. But I'll be the first to admit that Aliens was a massive blind spot in my otherwise very thorough action movie education. Despite being allowed to watch practically every 80s movie on the market thanks to my parents, The entire Alien franchise as a whole was something I missed, in part because of my fear of xenomorphs as a child, thanks Disney World, and partially because, despite my voracious appetite for more mature films, it's probably written in a parenting guide somewhere that showing your child a film about bloodthirsty parasitic monsters when she's 10 isn't exactly advisable. But I did eventually get there, thanks to the upcoming release of Alien Romulus, the trailer for which both scared the pants off me and finally intrigued me to see what all the fuss was about. I've always opted for more traditional monster films. See, my ability to quote The Lost Boys front to back. But my fascination with Final Girls gave me confidence that I'd enjoy the franchise, including the sequel directed by the same guy who helmed Avatar, a movie I saw 3 times in theaters when I was 11, despite only understanding half of it. I'm sure it's absolute heresy, but I do think that Aliens is the better film of the two. Ridley Scott's original project, at least for me, seemed more thriller than horror, the genre everyone refers to the franchise as, and where I think Alien 3 really excels. And aside from the terror inherent in the concept of parasitic facehuggers, it lacked what everyone I know hyped it up to be, truly scary. Cameron taking the most thrilling aspects of what worked in Alien and punching them up into an action film fits the xenomorphs and their queen much better. It also helps that I'm immediately more endeared to the crew Ripley saddled with in Aliens. While the Nostromo was absolutely stacked with Hollywood greats, including Harry Dean Stanton and John Hurt, there's an immense amount of charm to the ragtag military operation that makes me all the more upset when they're slowly picked off one by one. Even if having white actress Jeanette Goldstein play a Latina private is a severely misguided choice. They've got the kind of bombastic personalities that the characters in Alien lacked, in favor of Scott's more subdued storytelling approach, and it's impossible to resist Bill Paxton's charm as the panicky Private Hudson, arriving just a year after he played Meathead older brother Chet in John Hughes' Weird Science. Paul Reiser's turn as the seedy, underhanded Carter Burke is also a standout, primarily because his presence expands upon one of the themes I was most interested in the original film, the Weyland-Yutani Corporation trying to use the xenomorphs as biological weapons. Even more so because I actually liked the little creep in the first half of the movie, which quickly morphed into a loud cheer when one of many xenomorphs decided they'd had enough of his BS and, presumably, ripped his limbs from his body. Really, I should have known he was suspicious from the start. I mean, who rolls up to a military space station dressed like a yuppie? Aliens expands the universe of the franchise more than any of its sister films, and that's maybe its strongest point for someone coming to the series with totally fresh eyes. Unlike Alien, which has become so culturally ubiquitous that any burgeoning film kid is bound to encounter spoilers like I did, Aliens was totally new ground for me, even newer than Alien 3, which I'd seen fits and starts of thanks to the podcast I run about star Paul McGann. And aside from knowing about the existence of Carrie Hens Newt thanks to the film's poster, everything was a complete surprise. Some people complain about Cameron taking the lore of the xenomorphs too far when he introduced the idea of a queen bee xenomorph and her brood, but for me, it's the exact kind of exploration I wanted from Alien originally, as a girl who grew up obsessed with monsters to the point that I was watching Van Helsing far too young. There's still plenty we don't know about the aliens themselves at this point, where they came from, why they kill, what, if anything, can kill them, but Cameron stumbles into a thematic exploration of motherhood almost by accident with the Queen, something that Scott's original film touches on with its facehuggers and chestbursters dredging up fears of pregnancy as parasitic invasion. Newt and Ripley, who becomes the girl's surrogate mother, are a mirror and foil to the Queen and her hundreds of eggs, a mother figure by choice rather than by force, the way the entire terraforming colony of LV-426 met their grisly fate. Combine that with a further understanding of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, a mega entity that partners with the military almost like they own them, and Cameron's done triple the work Scott had to flesh out the alien universe into something big and iconic enough to latch onto. Without this film, we might still have Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, but I'm almost certain that wouldn't be the case for the handfuls of novels, comic books, video games, and other spin-offs that the franchise has generated since 1986. While Scott was the one to establish the lived-in feel of the Alien franchise that makes it so memorable, Cameron took that idea the rest of the way, setting the stage for what perhaps no one expected would be a franchise still alive and well almost 40 years later. I've always felt that Aliens just about had the edge over Ridley Scott's original. Maybe it's simply because, as a kid, it took me about 3 distinct occasions to sit down and get through the damn thing, thanks to a combination of its weighty runtime and a hyperactive group of friends. After teasing myself with that gripping opening 60 minutes or so, finally getting the film to myself and witnessing that explosive final hurdle undoubtedly blew my adolescent mind. 10 years ago, Empire magazine named the film the best sequel ever made. Perhaps the rankings would change in light of Mad Max Fury Road, Blade Runner 2049, and a handful of others, but its level of prestige has always stood my opinion in good stead. Since watching it for the first time, I've always made sure to use the director's cut upon revisits, as the development of Ripley from a bereaved mother to the guardian of recently orphaned Newt, which is all but missing in the theatrical version, felt like a crucial counterpoint to the Colonial Marines' misplaced bravado. Everything is badass in Aliens. Not only does the literal badassery of the revolutionary action scenes still hold up remarkably, but the swaggering insistence of the Colonial Marines to occupy ultra-masculine, hostile personas offer a transparent misdirect for the imminent carnage. The great Bill Paxton strutting around his team of ultimate badasses, Apone chewing his cigar to shreds, the sick burns and sexual boasts at breakfast. Aliens forged the concept of space marines that inspired so many film and video game properties to come, but it must be remembered that their initial creation was masked by insecurity. There's a reason why Game Over Man has resonated so heavily. Toxicity and machismo are easy shields to hide behind, but the layers quickly wear thin when tragedy levels the playing field. Cameron is clearly playing into 80s slasher tropes here, in comparison to Ridley Scott's more measured approach to the series' characters. Unlike the Nostromo crew, the Marines deserve to die in the cinematic sense, making the final act all the more satisfying when the more resolved, emotionally capable Ripley is once again forced to take her stand against the extraterrestrial threat. Once the set pieces really get going, it's easy to appoint Aliens as the standard for action filmmaking. That is until Cameron one-upped himself again with Terminator 2. But the thematic, horrific groundwork established by Scott shouldn't be forgotten, nor is it. Ripley's aversion to synthetic life forms is tested by Bishop, who, after spouting Asimov's laws of robotics to assure her safety, eventually becomes an invaluable savior. Now, faceless corporations take the place of Ash's role from the first film. The Weyland-Yutani logo is plastered on every wall and uniform, and Burke offers an equally chilling counterpoint to the influx of artificial persons, proof that you don't need to be made of tubing and programming to become robotically unfeeling. The obsession with spaces remains, and Scott's slow, exploratory camera work through spaceship interiors remains, though the USS Sulaco is obviously populated with mechanical weaponry and tools as opposed to the biological parallels of the Nostromo. Once the team reach the infected colony, however, there's far more emphasis on the biological colonizing of the xenomorphs. Cold, sinewy passages drip with bodily fluids and shape corridors like rib cages and oesophagi via mysterious, unseen methods. Framing the aliens as an unstoppable hive mind force, like ants or bees, was a stroke of brilliance. Not only does the insectoid imagery punctuate the species' otherness perfectly, it makes the foreboding potential existence of the Queen an implicit, unthinkable possibility from the first moments on LV-426, and a hopeless inevitability when she finally makes herself known. One aspect introduced here that I've always found to be grotesquely poignant is that both Ripley, in her traumatic nightmare, and the later victim of an emerging chestburster, begged to be killed. Perhaps a less sophisticated horror technique, and the confluence of trauma with suicide or euthanasia is definitely an irresponsible relic of the 1980s, but it still makes the skin crawl. Plus, Ripley's arc from immediate despair from the imminent threat of the xenomorphs to destructive determination was frankly unheard of within the horror genre at the time. Nancy Thompson and Kristen Parker's recurrences throughout the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise are possibly the only comparable contemporaries, but their retainment of victimhood is undeniable. Ripley wasn't the first female action hero, but her complex portrayal and satisfying arc ensured she wouldn't be the last. The Alien franchise would abruptly run out of steam with David Fincher's unfortunately botched Alien 3 and the subsequent attempts to scrutinize and expand on the series' mythology. Now, Disney's acquisition of Fox has added the property to its increasingly amorphous roster of IPs. Perhaps Scott can be redirected away from his misguided prequels, and an independent upstart filmmaker can reboot the franchise under the watchful eyes of the conglomerate's team of executives. Whatever the future of Alien, this particular sequel remains a landmark in action horror, James Cameron's best film, and a high bar for blockbuster filmmaking that is only surpassed perhaps once a decade. In the sequel to Alien, 1979, our story brings us back to Ripley some 57 years after she entered stasis. It turns out, colonists have settled the Zeta Reticuli planet where she initially encountered the alien. She returns with a group of colonial marines when the colonists disappear. She plans to exterminate the aliens they find, but of course the corporation does not, and hijinks ensue. I'm still trying to parse my negative reaction to the movie. I can recognize many good points in it. Sigourney Weaver is great. The action scenes with Ripley versus the Queen are very enjoyable, and the aesthetic surrounding the aliens is still delicious. Yet I found myself largely bored and annoyed while I was actually watching it. I knew to expect an action movie rather than horror this time around. I do vastly prefer horror. But one of my favorite infinite rewatch movies is Die Hard, 1988, so I had good reason to suspect I wouldn't mind the shift in genre. Aliens lacks the engaging dialogue and methodically escalated stakes of Die Hard. You really can't understate how much the dynamic between McClane and Gruber pulls the movie along. As cool as the xenomorph queen looks, she lacks the gravitas of Alan Rickman. Carter Burke, the resident Weyland-Yutani wiener who serves as primary antagonist for much of the movie, is not all that interesting either. So Die Hard wasn't a good comparison, and Aliens couldn't have been in conversation with it as Die Hard came 2 years later. It seems likelier that Aliens was some kind of improvement over older action movies. It earned quite a bit of cultural cachet in its time, including memes that have persisted to this day. Nuke it from orbit, so something here hit hard. I just don't know what. I'm just not all that familiar with its subgenre. I'm guessing that having a woman-led action movie by the guy who wrote Rambo 2 and Terminator was exciting. And boy, is Ripley a woman in Aliens. She was androgynous in the first movie. Themes of reproduction weren't especially played up then. By the time Aliens comes around, they've left Ripley's cat somewhere safe, thankfully, and replaced her with a small child, whose nurturing falls exclusively on Ripley's shoulders. Ripley is also put against an alien mother as her ultimate foe. The woman as childbearer aspect has been pulled into focus. I vaguely recall the few later franchise movies I saw, and it seems the reproductive stuff only gets increasing importance. Believe it or not, this came out only 12 years after women could have credit cards under their names in America. So I can appreciate how second-wave feminism might have enjoyed it. The Marines were generally obnoxious, though. The action scenes with the Marines in them were muddy and incoherent, possibly as a way to emphasize the emotional chaos of the situation, and their machismo leading into the battles got tiring. I suspect some of what I missed may be an expectation the Marines would be more useful, better regarded, and survive even a little bit. Without that expectation, there was very little pleasure in watching them fall apart. I really suspect I need to revisit this movie as part of a bigger self-education on 80s action movies. It will probably come across better that way. In the meantime, I am comfortable rating it 3 stars because Sigourney Weaver did her job excellently. Chekhov's mech suit was fun, as my child termed it, and I really do always love the alien aesthetic. The Queen Alien and her children, all of which Ripley is trying to destroy, the final struggle becomes that of two mothers pitted against one. Other in Alien, we learned virtually nothing about the creatures beyond the essentials of their life cycle. They hatch from an egg, use a paralyzed human as a host for Giler, then emerge, exploding from the host's chest to grow into a monstrous entity. Aliens gives us a clearer picture of the aliens. Society, they function as an insect colony with soldiers and an eggle queen. Indeed, Cameron is careful to pattern everything about the aliens on the kinds of behavior one might expect deep within a beehive or underneath an anthill, except that the aliens have far more intelligence and cunning than the average insect. These creatures have brains as well as instincts. They learn and adapt and understand rudimentary forms of communication, such as what Ripley means when she points the business end of a flamethrower in the direction of several dozen eggs. The Queen can even work an elevator from the time the Marines land on Elvin 426. Aliens features one standout action. Scene after another, the troops' failed first attack, and Ripley's timely rescue. Ripley and N struggle against the face huggers in the soundproof laboratory. The fight to keep the aliens out of the barricaded structure, in which motion detectors are used to heighten the tension, the flight through the corridors, and N's capture, Ripley's return to save. N and do battle with the Queen and the unexpected second ending. There are little breaks here and there to diffuse tension and allow for character development and relationship building. But these are not merely throwaway moments, and they don't last long. In one such instance, Hicks teaches Ripley how to use weapons in a scene that has obvious sexual overtones in another. The law. Marines discussed the most fitting punishment for the betrayer in their midst. In addition to being a master of the precisely executed action sequence, Cameron develops a powerful claustrophobic sense of atmosphere. Whether it's during the chaotic action sequences within the alien's hive on the inhospitable surface of LV-426 or behind the steel barricades within the colony, Cameron never fails to establish a mood and tone for the Marines. It's a dirty, sweaty business, and we're as aware of the heat as we are of the danger. The director chooses his camera shots carefully to elevate the level of excitement without completely disorienting the viewer. The film's editing requires a lot of quick cuts, but Aliens never adopts the MTV style that has become the stock and trade of so many recent action SL thriller directors. And while Cameron throws plenty of aliens onto the screen, he never gives us the opportunity to closely scrutinize them, at least until the Queen rears her ugly head. He keeps them moving and in the shadows so that they aim their menace. In Jaws, Steven Spielberg hid the flying shark away from the camera because of special effects limitations here. Cameron's decision is based solely on the idea that seen less is more frightening. The creepiest scenes in Aliens are not those of the creatures scuttling down corridors, but of them slowly uncoiling from the walls in near darkness. When the Marines first encounter them, we catch glimpses of their scaly flesh, but see nothing clearly. Ridley Scott developed Alien as a horror film, haunted house in space. Cameron's approach is different. Aliens is a fairly straightforward action-adventure picture. The horror elements are still there, most notably in an early dream sequence, and during the scene when the Marines encounter the cocooned colonists. But their impact is diminished. Nevertheless, even though he changes the tone, Cameron remains faithful to the original, something that cannot be said about the later two installments of the Alien Quartet, from plot points to visual cues. It is apparent that Cameron made a careful study of the first film before embarking upon the sequel. The aliens, based on the AIM, designed by H.R. Giler, possess virtually the same grotesque look: shiny black skin, pencil tail, row upon row of sharp teeth. The spaceships rendered using old-fashioned special effects, i.e. model work, not computer-generated, have the same workmanlike appearance. Starfaring behemoths built to be functional, not as aesthetically pleasing. In fact, it should be noted that although the FX work in Aliens may not be state-of-the-art by today's standards, it still holds up reasonably well. Two versions of Aliens exist. The first is the theatrical cut A, 13 7-minute edition that Fox released in movie houses across North America during the summer of 1986, with a running time of 154 minutes. The second is James Cameron's official director's cut, which includes a number of intriguing scenes, including a lengthy sequence on L-426, detailing events that lead to the colonists' obliteration. Although the additional material is spread throughout the film, the most telling moments occur early, including a key scene indicating how devastated Ripley is about the loss of her daughter, thus not damaging Aliens overall. Momentum given a choice, the restored director's cut is the preferred version. In fact, it may now be the only version available on home video, unless you to frequent a video store stocking older tapes. The only returning member of the cast from the original Alien is Sigourney Weaver here. She's even tougher than in the first film, a psychologically distressed woman who goes to war against the creatures that would destroy her. Surrogate daughter in the process, Weaver became one of the first buff female action heroines, a prototype for the few who have appeared on the scene in the 15 years since then, including Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2, another Cameron film, and Gina Davis in The Long Kiss Goodnight. She's every bit as imposing as a Schwarzenegger or Stallone and seems entirely comfortable in this sort of role. In fact, Weaver is far more effective in the action sequences than in the dramatic ones, where her approach is uncertain during one early scene. When she confronts the corporation board seeking to revoke her pilot's license, Weaver's performance is cringingly bad. To be fair, her dramatic scenes with Carrie Henn, who plays N, are more natural. Weaver has always been at her best in action and comedy situations, and most of Cameron's script plays to the former. Strength, certainly not the latter. Comedic moments in Aliens are rare and mostly relegated to Bill Paxton. The supporting cast features several Cameron regulars. These include Michael Biehn as the stolid, reliable grunt. Hicks Bean's other Cameron credits are the Terminator T2, where he had a cameo that was cut from the theatrical release but restored in the special edition, and the Abyss Bill Paxton, the Terminator True Lies Titanic, gives the most entertaining performance as Hudson, who has all the best lines and provides nearly 100% of the film's slim comic relief. Lance Henriksen, Piranha 2: The Terminator, a veteran of numerous science fiction and horror films, does a good job playing up the ambiguity of Bishop's android nature. Represents one of Alien's more intriguing subplots. Stand-up comedian Paul Reiser, making his first and at least to date only appearance for Cameron, is convincing as a total slimeball. Those who sympathized with his likable character in Mount About You will be surprised how easy it is to hate Reiser. Here for James Cameron, who would go on to direct two of the 1990s most memorable motion pictures, the action-packed Terminator 2 and the all-time box office champion Titanic. The Terminator may have been the movie to put him on the map, but Aliens announced him as a force to be reckoned with for fans of the Alien series. Aliens represented an unqualified triumph, exceeding the expectations of the most optimistic faithful. Unfortunately, the lamentable Alien 3 stalled the series' momentum effectively, trashing the emotional core of its predecessor, while sending the franchise into a creative free fall when it comes to the logical marriage of action-adventure and science fiction. Few films are as effective or accomplished as is Aliens, and there's nothing on the market, either in theaters or on video store shelves, that will leave you as thoroughly exhausted. Other information about this film in the sequel to Alien. 1979, our story brings us back to Ripley, some 57 years after she entered stasis. It turns out colonists have settled the Zeta Reticuli planet, where she initially encountered the alien. She returns with a group of colonial marines. When the colonists disappear, she plans to exterminate the aliens they find. But of course, the corporation does not, and jinx ensue. I'm still trying to parse my negative reaction to the movie. I can recognize many good points in it. Sigourney Weaver is great. The action scenes with Ripley versus the Queen are very enjoyable, and the aesthetic surrounding the aliens is still delicious. Yet I found myself largely bored and annoyed while I was actually watching it. I knew to expect an action movie rather than horror this time around. I do vastly prefer horror, but one of my favorite infinite rewatch movies is Die Hard 1988, so I had good reason to suspect I wouldn't mind the shift in not. Genre Aliens lacks the engaging dialogue and methodically escalated stakes of Die Hard. You really can't understate how much the dynamic between Emlan and Gruber pulls the movie along As cool as the xenomorph queen looks, she lacks the gravitas of Alan Rickman, Carter Burke, the resident W, and Utai Weiner, who serves as primary antagonist for much of the movie, is not all that interesting. Either it seems likelier that Aliens was some kind of improvement over older action movies. It earned quite a bit of cultural cash in its time, including memes that have persisted to this day, nuke it from orbit. So something here hit hard. I just don't know what. I'm just not all the familiar with its subgenre. I'm guessing that having a woman action movie by the guy who wrote Rambo 2 and Terminator was exciting, and boy is Ripley, a woman in Aliens. She was androgynous in the first movie. Themes of reproduction weren't especially played up then. By the time Aliens comes around, they've left Ripley's cat somewhere safe, thankfully, and replaced her with a small child whose nurturing falls exclusively on Ripley's shoulders. Ripley is also put against an alien mother as her ultimate foe. The woman as child-bearer aspect has been pulled into focus. I vaguely recall the few later franchise movies I saw, and it seems the reproductive stuff only gets increasing importance. Believe it or not, this came out only 12 years after women could have credit cards under their names in both. The action scenes with the Marines in them were muddy and incoherent, possibly as a way to emphasize the emotional chaos of the situation, and their machismo leading into the battles got tiring. I suspect some of what I missed. Maybe an expectation the Marines would be more useful, better regarded, and survive even a little bit without that expectation. There was very little pleasure in watching them fall apart. I really suspect I need to revisit this movie as part of a bigger self-education on 80s action movies. It will probably come across better that way. In the meantime, I'm comfortable rating it 3 stars because Sigourney Weaver did her job excellently. Chekhov's mech suit was fun, as my child termed it, and I really do always love the alien aesthetic. The ads for Aliens claim that this movie will frighten you, as few movies have, and for once, the ads don't lie. The movie is so intense that it creates a problem for me as a reviewer. Do I praise its craftsmanship, or do I tell you it left me feeling wrung out and unhappy? It has been a week since I saw it, so the emotions have faded a little, leaving with me an appreciation of the movie's technical qualities. But when I walked out of the theater, there were knots in my stomach from the film's roller coaster ride of violence. This is not the kind of movie where it means anything to say you enjoyed it. Aliens is a sequel to the very effective 1979 film Alien, but it tells a self-contained story that begins 57 years after the previous story ended. The first time around, you may recall Sigourney Weaver and a shipload of her fellow space voyagers were exploring a newly discovered planet when they found an abandoned spaceship. Surviving in the ship was an alien life form that seemed to consist primarily of teeth. The aliens were pure malevolence. Their only function was to attack and eat anything that was warm and moved, and they incubated their young inside the bodies of their victims. Weaver was the only survivor of that first expedition, and after saving her ship by expelling an alien through the airlock into deep space, she put herself into hibernation. She is found 57 years later by a salvage ship, and when she awakes, she is still tormented by nightmares. The script does not provide her, however, with even a single line of regret after she learns that 57 years have passed and everyone she knew is dead. A new expedition is sent back to the mystery planet. Weaver is on board. She knows what the aliens are like and thinks the only sane solution is to nuke them from outer space. But in the meantime, she learns to her horror that a human colony has been established on the planet, and billions of dollars have been invested in it. Now, Earth has lost contact with the colony. Has it been attacked by aliens? Are there stars in the sky? The crew is made up of an interesting mixed bag of technicians and military personnel. My favorites were Lance Henriksen as a loyal android, Jeanette Goldstein as a muscular Marine private, and Michael Biehn as the uncertain Corporal Hicks. Also on board is the slimy Burke. Paul Reiser represents the owners of the planet's expensive colony and dreams of making millions by using the aliens as a secret weapon. The movie gives us just enough setup to establish the characters and explain the situation. Then the action starts. The colony has, of course, been overrun by the aliens, all except for one plucky little girl, Carrie Hen, who has some survived by hiding in the air ducts. The Marines explore the base on foot, which seems a little silly in view of the great speed with which the aliens attack. Nobody seems very interested in listening to Weaver's warnings after all. She's only the one person who has seen an alien. So what does she know? And then the movie escalates into a non-stop war between human and alien. It's here that my nerves started to fail. Aliens is absolutely painfully and unremittingly intense for at least its last hour. Weaver goes into battle to save her colleagues herself, and the little girl and the aliens drop from the ceiling, pop, up out of the floor, and crawl out of the ventilation shafts in one of the movie's less plausible moments. One alien even seems to know how to work the elevator buttons. I have never seen a movie that maintains such a pitch of intensity for so long. It's like being on some kind of hair-raising carnival ride that never stops. I don't know how else to describe. The movie made me feel bad. It filled me with feelings of unease and disque and anxiety. I walked outside and I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was drained. I'm not sure aliens is what we mean by entertainment. Yet I have to be accurate about this movie. It is a superb example of filmmaking craft. The director, James Cameron, has been assigned to make an intense and horrifying thriller, and he has delivered. Weaver, who is on screen almost all the time, comes through with a very strong, sympathetic performance. She's the thread that holds everything together. More detail. Personally, I don't consider it a stretch to call Ridley Scott's 1979 science fiction classic, Alien, a groundbreaking and incredibly influential film for the genre. It was a near-perfect combination of horror and sci-fi, which resulted in an intense and profoundly innovative thriller that still holds up today. Now, when you have a movie so highly regarded, tackling a sequel is a pretty daunting task. You're taking already great and established material and building on it, while also creating a film that can stand on its own merit. Such was at the job facing James Cameron, writer and director of the 1986 sequel Aliens. Cameron's approach to the sequel centered around creating a story that captured both the horror and sci-fi elements that made the first film such a success, and adding a militaristic action component to it, much like Ridley Scott before him. Cameron is deliberate in setting up his story. Alien starts with Ellen Ripley, Sigourney Weaver, being discovered by a salvage crew who come across her shuttle adrift in space. It turns out that she has been in stasis for over 50 years, since the horrible events on the Nostromo in the first film. She's questioned by a group of executives behind the Nostromo's mission, who find her story questionable and her actions extreme. Later, she's visited by Carter Burke, Paul Reiser, a company representative, who informs her that they had recently lost contact with a small colony on LV-426, the same planet where Ripley's former crew had first came across the alien eggs. Burke asks Ripley to accompany him and a group of colonial Marines to investigate. Ripley wants no part of going back, but agrees after being reassured that the mission is to destroy the aliens and not study them. She sets out with Burke, the Marines, and an android named Bishop Lance Henriksen to check out L426 and hopefully extinguish any threat they come across. One interesting and recurring obstacle for Ripley is the constant disregard for her information and input, planted right in the middle of a predominantly male environment she constantly encounters. Skepticism and mockery. The corporate heads didn't buy her story. Burke was skeptical of the severity of the threat, and the Marines laugh it off as a simple bug hunt. But Ripley not only turns out to be right, but she maintains the most calm and level head of any of the group once the inevitable threat is realized. Through this, Cameron takes the tough survivor character from the first film and builds her into what I believe is one of the strongest female roles in cinema. Not only does Ripley adapt through physical toughness, but you see a leadership that proves vital to their survival. But while she's tough, I loved how we also see the gentleness and love she shows, especially after finding a young girl named Carrie Hen alone in the ventilation systems of one of the colony office buildings. The two connect, as Ripley takes on a mother-like role for a young girl who has seen horrors and lost everything. The Marines themselves cover all of the personality angles, including the cigar-chomping sergeant Al Matthews, the smart Alec, wisecracking Hudson Bill Paxton, and the dependable by the books Corporal Hicks, Michael Biehn. We also get the tougher than all the guys Vasquez, Jeanette Goldstein, and her heavy gunner partner, Drake Mark Ron, and an inexperienced and sometimes incompetent Lieutenant Gorman, William Hope, who was just assigned to be the squad's field leader. We get some cliched but fun military banter between the soldiers during the first half of the film, and later see them in full combat mode fighting for survival. For the audience, it really becomes one of those let's see who survives stories, but it works so well. Because even though these are tough and resilient soldiers, they are humbled by the realization that they are overmatched. There are no Rambos in this bunch, only desperate people trying to survive. And when everything does hit the proverbial fan, they have to rely on a lot more than just strength and firepower to stay alive. That's one reason Ripley is such a force in the movie. Cameron is very clever in the way he sets up the tension. Again, much like Ridley Scott for most of the film, the true horror isn't in what you see, but what you think you are. Seeing, you get fleeting glances of the aliens only in enough to project images into your mind, in a sense. Cameron has the audience paste these brief images together in their minds to create what these deadly creatures look like. It isn't until the very end that we get an unhindered look at them. I still remember the first time I saw the film. The brief camera shots of the creatures in motion really created a sense of tension and suspense. Of course, now all movie fans know what the aliens look like, thanks to the internet, comic books, sequels, etc. But the way Cameron never fully unveiled them in the film until the end was very effective, the Oscar-winning special. Effects of aliens were another major reason the movie works. The skilled crew use an amazing assortment of miniatures, trick cameras, and lighting, carefully designed costumes, and a large number of puppeteers that contribute to a visual world that still looks impressive even in today's fancy CGI-driven age. So many cool details add pop to the film, such as the Marines' futuristic armor, weapons, and light vehicles, as well as their technologies and sciences. The effects most certainly stand out, but they always stay consistent with the movie's gritty, dark tone. The action sequences throw the soldiers and crew right into the heat, darkness, and the unknown. Much like us, they don't know for sure what they're fighting. The brief glimpses of the aliens through gun flashes, shoulder-mounted flashlights, and dim emergency lighting makes the combat intensely fierce. Ray Lovejoy's editing of the action scenes is phenomenal, as is James Harrer's score. As a result, Aliens delivers two of the most pulse-pounding battles SL escape sequences. You'll see another major accomplishment for Aliens is the recognition it received from the motion picture community. The movie received 7 Academy Award nominations, none bigger than Sigourney Weaver. For Best Actress, of course, she didn't win. But the fact that a science fiction horror film would receive such recognition was a major step forward for the genre. But Weaver was also surrounded by an excellent cast. I loved Henriksen as Bishop, the company android. He's a cryptic character in the sense that we know from the first film that androids aren't without, shall I say, glitches, but Henriksen is a believable artificial person, and we like Ripley, just aren't sure we can trust him. I also really liked Michael Biehn's performance. He's a tough but open-minded soldier, and when the situation goes bad, he steps up. Biehn doesn't play him as a testosterone-driven macho type. He's at times unsure, and he understands what it will cost to get his people out alive. Aliens was an extremely ambitious sequel that took a pretty sacred first film and built upon it in the most satisfying way. It's a fantastic sci-fi movie. It's a fantastic action movie. It's a fantastic horror movie. It blends all of these things together and creates what I consider to be one of best motion picture sequels of all time, with the exception of the stereotypical "we are soldiers" profanity. The dialogue is crisp, while some may describe the first half of the film as languid. I think the pacing is brilliantly deliberate. The special effects were astounding for its time and still hold up today. The acting from each character, big or small, is strong throughout the film. The direction, the score, the editing, and the sound design grab us and drag us into the unnerving world. It's just a great movie. And while some may not respond to a handful of things that are connected to the decade the film was made in, Aliens is still one of my favorite movies of all time. And while it is a sci-fi movie, it's also a great action picture. The Alien franchise, despite being bigger and more well-known than, say, the Predator series, the films themselves have also gone through a similar spell to the latter, wherein which the earlier films are vastly superior to the follow-ups, with particular note towards the 1979 original Alien film and 1980 SS Aliens, and the overly inferior and disappointingly Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection. I enjoyed the prequel Alien, but I didn't love it as much as I truly wanted to, and felt it needed more characters to enhance and galvanize the story and plot and to give more for the film to work with. And that is where Aliens comes in, and it is for that reason that I prefer this film to the first one, with tighter corridors, eerie, almost claustrophobic-like atmosphere. That was revisited a year later in Predator. Aliens definitely took on a slightly different approach to the first film that is more on the lines of Hunter versus Hunted, as predictable as it sounded for me. It definitely enhanced the viewing experience and made Aliens more suspenseful, tense, and nail-biting. Also like how they expanded upon the Aliens universe by adding in different themes ideas, and that though technically the story is still centrally driven by Ellen Ripley, the main character. She isn't the only character that this film focuses on. There is that debate about Alien being the better film than Aliens, and vice versa. Ultimately, one's preference for either film all boils down to how you feel about each one and what you enjoyed most about that film. That the other film doesn't have, or do in many ways, Aliens, is the bona fide and almost gold standard in sci-fi R-rated sequels that, with the exception of, say, Terminator 2, other films of this genre have failed to live up to Starship Troopers, is one example where it kind of operated like Aliens through the battle scenes, but with massive bugs instead of xenomorphs. But the film itself was more tongue-in-cheek and satirical in tone, as opposed to being serious after being thaw in an opening scene. Lone survivor of the first film, Ellen Ripley wakes up after being discovered in a prolonged cryogenic sleep, and later on tags along with a squad of colonial marines to help find and kill the xenomorphs. But as they do, the creatures start to pick out their victims one by one, and with ease. Usually, secondary characters in films are rather forgettable, though. I'd watch a film with these colonial marines in it. They look like a pretty cool bunch, even if most of them get killed off because of their characterizations, which are touched upon. In this film, we end up caring about the fate of each of them. The three members that stand out are Private Viquez Hudson, played by Bill Paxton, and Corporal Hicks by Michael Biehn, who had previously made his name with 1984's The Terminator. They are not cookie cutter, who have screen time for 1 minute, then are picked and killed off 2 minutes later. Then you also have this child character, an orphan named N, whose parents were killed by the xenomorphs. Rounding off the set is the traitor Burke, who at first seems to be an okay kind of guy, but once he turns his back on the team, his true colors are then revealed. It appears that not only is he a murderer, but his main interest is money. Thankfully, however, he gets his just desserts later on. Arguably, Aliens is bigger, well-paced, and more accessible as a film. It offered a whole lot more to the package than the first film did. As well as going beyond the horror conventions, it has that additional action element that entices wider audiences to it, that horror doesn't do. And so I'm glad that it did not go down the same route as Alien. And in incorporating the colonial marines, James Cameron expands on the themes and ideas of the first film, whilst adding another set of secondary characters to fight alongside Ripley. As Ellen Ripley, Sigourney Weaver's character is a lot more fleshed out this time around. Reprising her role from the first film, she builds upon her character's development of the original film, and thus Ripley is more confident, stronger, and who has no fear. She is far more imposing here, and her feistiness and eagerness to get things done properly draw similar comparisons to Sarah Connor in Terminator 2. The film is also well written, with some memorable lines, courtesy of Bill Paxton and Sigourney Weaver as Ripley shouting at the Queen, "Xenomorph, get away from her. You be asterisk 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 yet." As much as I enjoyed Aliens, one or two faults I did have with it is that the first third of the film is exceedingly slow-paced, and whilst that is needed to amplify the tension and suspense in the middle of the film, I just felt it took far longer for things to build up also. But for Ripley Vasquez Hudson and Ed Hicks, the remaining characters, including N, but for the xenomorph creatures are forgettable. If Alien rendered more of a horror film, then Aliens comes across as more of a slasher-type action sci-fi-based film that is more action-oriented, as well as operating as a military one. And in a great way, too, extra information. Aliens is the perfect sequel The Empire Strikes Back. While certainly a better film than Star Wars, was more a polished segment in a longer story than a standalone adventure. But Aliens is the model for every potential sequel maker. It connects irrefutably with the events of the original, even to the point of starting exactly where the drama left off, albeit 57 years later, and expands on all the ideas and themes while simultaneously differentiating itself, the same yet entirely different perfect. It also stands as testament to the unwavering vision and icy nerve of James Cameron here, directing only his third movie utilizing the bombed-out skeleton of Acton Power Station to create the vast industrial Grim Colony SL Hive. Setting for events, he was faced with a veteran British crew who had worked on Alien and worshipped the ground Ridley. Scott walked on, what could this Canadian punk kid know well? For starters, that in this case more is indeed more. Not just a single ruthless, unbeatable killing machine, but an army of them on home turf, writing as well as directing. Cameron posited a simple premise. The planet LV-426, where the first alien was unwittingly discovered, has been colonized by the Nostromo's mother company, Anutani. And now, communication has been lost time to send in a crack team of space marines and enlist the help of a traumatized Ripley. There you have it, Marines. Plus the ever-resourceful Ripley versus Aliens. Plus, this was genre splicing. Art the war movie fused inextricably with science. Fiction, he was also fascinated with Ripley and understood straight away this was her story. It is her resourcefulness. Her wit's courage for Ripley is an acceptance of fear and dealing with it. With intelligence, Weaver deservedly got an Oscar nomination. What also counts? Here is execution. Cameron accepted Scott's, and of course H. Art Gier's design ethic, glow scaly bits, loads of teeth, and long, dark, dingy, dripping corridors, but reinterpreted them as a battleground rather than a haunted house. The point he grasped straight away is that you can't win against this foe or the stigma, the sheer terror that this endomorph engenders would be lost. You can only escape. He replaced Scott's behind-you tension with a muscular fury, unrelenting, sweaty pomade pant-filling movie intensity. Nothing before or since has locked the viewer in with such an all-consuming sense of peril. Audiences and critics actually complained of physical discomfort, even illness upon exiting the auditorium. Thematically, Aliens also expounds the setup further. Central is a continuation of Scott and Dan O'Bannon, the original screenwriter bogeyman hypothesis. What if a life form was so attuned to survival, it became the perfect killing machine, and as such garnered a degree of Darwin-acidic respect, even form its prey, an alien lunatic android, though he was praised, the monster, for its purity. Even Ripley confronted by the duplicity of company man Burke. Paul Reiser has to admit, you don't see them each other over for a goddamn percentage, then it really gets going Alien as giant fuss. And now there's a whole army of them. Versus feminist heroine. The feminist subtext is hardly sub at all. Ripley is one of the strongest female characters in movie history, closer to Cameron's heart, and a theme that recurs throughout. His work is the preservation of the nuclear family, with N rescued and Ripley taking on the role of surrogate mother. We only need at Hicks' gentlemanly, but by no means dominant father, to complete our model of perfect family unit. The other survivor, the android Bishop, well, he's either a kindly uncle or a pet dog or something. This whole notion is finally boiled down to a remarkable battle of maternal instincts, Ripley defending her child, and the Queen alien defending, or at least avenging her. Children summed up memorably in Ripley's battle call, "Get away from her." The biology of the species has been developed to the point where empathy, if not sympathy, is acceptable. And if you want to keep this up, there is the Nunam in Space Metaphor Unseen, GS mounting stealth ATT attacks, and the retreating Yanks totally undone by a tactic and mindset they cannot comprehend, a metaphor for U.S. foreign policy the best. Blockbusters not only deliver exhilarating action sequences, but they are also able to provide their audience with a message. James Cameron's Aliens, the 1986 sequel to Ridley Scott's Alien, 1979, holds up as one of the best science fiction SL action films of all time due to its thrilling effects, compelling characters, and messaging regarding motherhood and trauma. The film's thematic core pushes its boundaries past the typical genre schlock, attempting and succeeding to give its audience something. Universal. The Alien series at its core is about future humanity fight with a group of extraterrestrial life forms. The xenomorphs, also at the crux of the film franchise, are potent ideas about the effects of greed, often portrayed through the WH and Yutani Corporation, which seeks financial profit from harvesting the alien life forms. The first film, Alien, depicts a group of humans' first encounter with a xenomorph and the disastrous consequences that follow. Aliens begins 57 years after the events of the first film. Though through the eyes of the main character, Ellen Ripley, Sigourney Weaver, almost no time has passed. Ripley was in stasis, being the only survivor of the Nostrum ship crew after a xenomorph slaughtered the rest. This sequel finds Ripley surrounded by a new cast of characters who attempt to combat the alien creatures. Whereas the first film features a horror atmosphere, Cameron opted to ramp up the action for Aliens. The result is an exciting, still often terrifying feature that entertains while bringing a certain thematic richness that elevates Aliens above the typical genre film. Through the film, and specifically through Ripley, Cameron explores two main ideas: the effects of trauma and the solace of them. Motherhood. Ripley begins the film with mental and emotional scars accumulated in the first film after seeing the rest of her crew killed by the xenomorph. She is seen having nightmares and hallucinations about the alien attack, even experiencing in a dream a replication of the famous chest-bursting scene from the first film, where a xenomorph is born by bursting through the chest of a human host. Ripley's trauma looms over the film's first half, as she remembers the horrible atrocities the creatures are capable of. Her experience also hinders her trust for her new crew, at least. At first, she especially dislikes the android, Bishop Lance Henriksen, after having been betrayed by an android in the first film. She also clashes with other members like Corporal Dwayne Hicks, Michael Biehn, and Private William Hudson Bill Paxton. Part of her initial animosity towards the group is their unwillingness to take the threat of the alien seriously. Despite Ripley's warnings, her mental state and associated trauma manifest themselves in various ways throughout the film. Only through her role as mentor Slother to the young N. Carrie Henn is Ripley able to escape her past. The crew finds, while searching for a human colony on the planet LV-426, the home of the xenomorphs and its facehuggers, the parasitic life forms that are the second stage of the alien's life cycle. Ripley's demeanor instantaneously shifts to that of a nurturing mother figure. T. Weaver does not get enough credit for her performance, being able to switch seamlessly between confident, non-nonsense leader to the kind, caring parental personality towards aliens. Plays with the idea defining femininity in the modern age, painting Ripley as the ideal representative. She fights, she leads, she puts people, mostly the men, in their place while also caring for and mentoring the next generation. This idea culminates with the famous "Getaway from her, you be as risk" T-line in the film's closing minutes when the xenomorph queen boards the cruise ship and attacks Ripley in a true audience applause moment emerges in one of the ship's cargo loading exosites, reminiscent of the battle suits in Avatar, and fights the creature. She triumphs over the alien queen by sending it out to space through the ship's airlock. The line delivered right before the fight puts the film's key message on display. Women in society can not only be nurturers, but they can also be fighters. Cameron plays with the concept of gender roles throughout this film in other ways as well, and challenges some of its accepted ideas that have formed societal thinking throughout history. Cameron weaves these complex themes and ideas into Aliens via his escalated storytelling. He is a master of building up to the action, while still making the exposition introduction of characters and other non-action-packed elements of the story just as compelling. It is easy to forget that over an hour passes before the first big action set piece in Aliens. Cameron uses the time wisely by building up Ripley's emotional arc and introducing the audience to key characters, each whom represent different facets of the modern view of masculinity and femininity. Once the action scenes begin, they pack a much more visceral and emotional punch because of the film's rising tension in Aliens fans may recognize several aesthetic aspects that would become popular in other Cameron films, specifically his 2 Avatar films. While the overall technical aspects of the film are impressive, they never become the focus at the detriment of the story. Cameron does not feel the constant need to impress the audience. He tells the story effectively and throws in some incredible visual moments that serve the story's purpose. Certain shots in this film are technically magnificent and still terrifying to this day, including the shot of the aliens crawling through the ceiling and the shot of the xenomorph emerging from the water behind a terrified and the technical wizardry on Cameron's part never outshines the story he's telling, which is why the film continues to remain relevant. One could watch Aliens without discovering a deeper meaning or without marveling at the technical achievements, and still walk away thinking about how great the film is. Many fans consider the film a classic simply due to its blending of sci-fi and horror elements. However, the film seems to have secured its place in the cinematic canon, not only because of its great genre beats, but also because of the thematic weight Cameron was able to bring to this franchise. While the first Alien film certainly introduced some interesting ideas, Aliens continues that thread, making both films classics. Aliens succeeds on so many levels, but it's the film's willingness to explore universal ideas that has made it one of the most enduring and endearing sci-fi films of all time. This film, directed by James Cameron, screenplay by James Cameron, story by James Cameron, David Giler, Walter Hill, produced by Gale and Hurd, starring Sigourney Weaver. Cinematography, Adrian Biddle, edited by Ray Lovejoy. Music by James Hira. Production company, Brandywine Productions, distributed by 20th Century. Fox release date, July 18, 1986. Running time, 137 minutes. Countries, United States, United Kingdom. Language, English. Budget, $18.5 million. Box office, $13.11 to $83.3 million. So guys, this is the review, Ovaye, and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.